Hey guys, it's the last set of notes for the chapter. This is on time zones, and obviously, before we had clocks, before we had devices that even can measure time, they would use sundials. And here's an example of one. So you look at the shadow. With this actually pointed in a certain direction, you could actually tell the time. Because the sun, remember, is doing an arc through the sky, so it's easy to track. And it's pretty much the simplest way. Obviously, now clocks we use to keep track of time, and that's just a funky looking clock, backwards clock. That would be very confusing to have up. Local time, just so you realize, is time based on the rotation of the Earth. And places on the same longitude line will likely be in the same time zone. That's not always true, though, because we do follow geographic borders of countries or states and provinces. So occasionally they will be crooked, the time zones, a little bit. But generally, if you travel north and south, you're not going to change your time zone. But if you do travel east, you will go ahead in hours. So towards Europe, you go ahead in hours. And if you go to the west, you go behind in hours. And this is definitely a concern if you're a traveler. Because again, you'll experience what's called jet lag. So if you travel far out of your time zone and end up in a foreign country far away, again, you have to get used to waking up at their time, going to sleep at their time. And then when you come back, then you got to adjust back to our time zone once again. So either way, travel can be difficult because of the time zones. There's approximately 15 degrees per time zone because again there's 360 degrees in a circle, 24 hours in a day, so if you divide that you get 15. There's 24 time zones in the world, and that's the way that works, so it's 24 hours in a day. Sun's at the highest point, we call that solar noon, and again solar noon can vary a little bit before or after noontime. Because again, our sun paths can be longer or shorter during certain times of the year. And also, we also have our time changes that we do with our clocks. Solar time is sundial time, and again, that's based on the motions of the sun. And again, so if we were just taking care of that, we weren't even paying attention to a clock, which some of you guys might experience when we had some power outages. That was kind of interesting. Waking up with the sun and going to sleep when the sun went down, but that was an interesting experience. A solar day is actually defined as the time it takes for the sun to go through its path from solar noon one day to solar noon the next day. So the solar day is technically more or less than 24 hours. It's actually dependent on the length of the sun path. All right. Also mean solar time is dividing the day into exactly 24 hours. So that's what we do. That's what we're used to, is the mean solar time. All right, and here's just a quick little thing just to kind of visualize it. Again, from a teacher upstate, which I thank you for making it again. Basically, this is a rotation of the Earth, and here's New York here. It's flickering. You can see on the bottom it shows you the time. So again, just like we talked about when we talked about rotation, remember it rotates out of the light. That will be sunset, which right here, and then you get to midnight, and then you end up getting sunrise again when you come back into the light, noon, and then back to sunset. So either way, that's the way it works out. All right, the world time zone. So again, there's 24 time zones in the world. International date line also is an important line. That's where the date changes first in the world. So if you're on this side, obviously you're going to experience the date change first. Hawaii is one of the last places, Hawaii, Alaska, and these islands here are the last places to experience the date for that calendar day. So either way, so these are the time zones, and again, you notice they're not straight, even though they do mimic the longitude lines, which are vertical. But again, 15 degrees per time zone approximately. They didn't want to split up states and borders of countries, so you see they're crooked going through different areas of the continents. And here's the United States. So we have the Eastern time zone, we have the Central, Mountain, and Pacific. So if you're a sports fan, obviously you are familiar with that, because even just TV, they'll say 10-9 Central, all right, because 10 o'clock on the East Coast and then 9 Central. So you'll hear that occasionally. Or they'll say 60 Minutes will air next, except for the Pacific time zone, all right, which we'll get it later on. So they're talking about the time zones. Airing of TV programs will be different. Also, when you travel, you have to get used to that new time zone. A couple of weird ones, just so you know. Arizona, Indiana, and I believe Hawaii, possibly, don't follow the daylight savings that we do. So you notice that Arizona is actually part of the Pacific time zone during the summertime, and then during the winter it becomes part of the mountain time zone. So just a little known fact. Same thing with Indiana. Indiana comes part of the central time zone in the summer, and in the winter it's part of the eastern time zone. So just to show you. So it's an hour per time zone. You go back in time as you go towards the west. All right, so just a couple little questions. So number one asks, the time zone that were established to help deal with the fact that day and night that occurs in different times of the earth is due to, and the answer, so take a moment and think, and the answer should be Earth's rotation. Okay, because remember, we rotate once fully in 24 hours. Okay, time zones are based on various degrees of, and should be, longitude. In the lower 48 states of the United States, how many time zones are there? Okay, so lower 48, that's what we just saw in the last picture, so the answer is 4. Okay, there are actually 2 more. You have Alaska and, of course, Hawaii time as well. The time in Denver compared to New York City is, all right, let's go back a slide just a moment. Which you got to go back. Whoops, lost my pointer. Let me go back a slide. So if the time in New York, right here, to get back to Denver's time, you're going to go back 2 hours. So just to give you an example, so right now, let's just say it's 4 p.m. here. Okay, if you go to the central time zone, it's going to be 3 p.m. And lastly, Denver, which is in the mountain time zone, is going to be at 2 p.m. So you're going back an hour for each. And then if you were in California, it'd be 1 p.m. So it goes back 1 hour for each time zone as you go towards the west. Okay, and if you go east, you go ahead in time. Okay, so make sure you know that pattern. And actually Europe, just to give you an idea, about 5 hours ahead of us in some places on the eastern part of Europe. Because I remember my sister was over in Germany for a while, and that's how she was about 5 hours ahead of us. So we had to plan out our phone calls with her because of that being overseas. So, all right. So hopefully you guys are getting this, and I'll see you next time.